President, what would the use be?
No chance.
What would the use be of repeating the bombing? You did it for 38 days.
Well, no, we did.
And you did not get the political changes in Iran.
No, I had a total military victory. But the fake news, guys like you write incorrectly. You're a fake guy, and guys like you write about incorrectly. We had a total military victory. We knocked out their entire Navy. We knocked out their entire Air Force. We knocked out all of their anti-aircraft weaponry. We knocked out all of their radar.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. That was Donald Trump aboard Air Force One answering a question from David Sanger of the New York Times about the Trump administration's inability to achieve its political objectives in the war with Iran. Trump launches into the same predictable tirade about America's military achievements without acknowledging at all that the goal of military action is to achieve political ends. That's a nod to Clausewitz for the military history nerds out there. But as I have said before, this war is using all of the wrong metrics for success. And even when Trump does take credit for America's military successes, he's wrong. The last time he bragged about taking out Iran's air defenses, they shot down an American F-15 a couple days later. We have not taken out Iran's military capacity, and he knows that, which is why Trump reverts to his usual tactic of not just avoiding the question, but of attacking the questioner, this time accusing David Sanger of treason.
I actually think it's sort of treasonous what you write, but you and the New York Times and CNN, I would say, are the worst.
So on another war,
you should know better. You're a professor. You know better. Your editors tell you what to write, and you write it. You should be ashamed of yourself.
This is another war. Is there any?
I actually think it's treason.
This is always a tell. When Trump knows he cannot win the merits of an argument, he makes it personal. But the facts won't go away. The Trump regime launched a stupid war of choice in an area of the world it does not understand, and it's losing. I asked a former Navy commander, an F-18 pilot who flew missions over the Strait of Hormuz, to help us understand the reality of what's going on there, especially when it comes to Iran's military capability. Jason Knapp also served on NATO's international military staff, and lucky for us, he is now running for Congress. We get into all of it. Here's me and Commander Jason Knapp. Jason Knapp, Commander Knapp, welcome to the show. We got a lot to cover. I want to start, though, with the Strait of Hormuz. You were a Fifth Fleet F-18 guy flying missions over the Strait. Give us a sense of what that is like operationally. What are you looking for? I mean, even 20 years ago, I think my service predates yours by a bit, but even 20 years ago as a junior lieutenant, I knew that page one of the Iranian military's playbook, if anything like this went down, was close the Strait of Hormuz. You had to have known that too as a senior combat pilot.
Yeah. I mean, the Strait of Hormuz it is one of the more congested straits that we would operate in, but certainly one of the most dangerous ones, simply because on one side we have, a land jutting out, and the other side, a known adversary who, is not and has not been very friendly to us. It is one of the most dangerous places that we would actually transit through. And seeing what's happening now, literally probably anyone in the military could have seen this coming.
Well, they didn't somehow. How do you understand this Defense Department's inability to prepare for the most likely scenario? How do you explain the lack of prepositioning of the minesweepers, the utter shock and surprise from Hegseth all the way up to the president himself that Iran was going to launch missiles and possibly mine the strait? How do you wrap your head around a Defense Department that is this woefully unprepared?
It's somewhat difficult and then also somewhat easy. From a military perspective, I have the confidence that, the flag officers that are providing the advice and counsel that they're supposed to their civilian leadership, they're doing exactly that. But I think we've seen with this administration that anytime they're told something that doesn't fit the narrative that they either want or that they are trying to push out, they simply discount it. The fact that we had lost, F-15s to Kuwaiti F-18s at the beginning of this war, I think is indicative of the fact that we did not tell folks exactly what we were doing and how we were going to operate. And we're claiming that these are our friends and allies, yet we certainly didn't seem to have the trust enough in our allies and friends in the region to, ask for their assistance, to provide them the information that was required so that they didn't accidentally shoot our planes out of the sky. And I think it just translates into what's happening in Hormuz. Everyone knew that has been there that, of course, they're going to shut it down. They're going to have mines. They're going to have the RIGC Navy still available to them. It's simply something that Hegseth just refuses to understand.
Hey everyone, it's Ken. Super quick break to remind you that I've got a Substack page. Please consider subscribing for exclusive content and bi-weekly Substack lives. And for the next month, every paid subscription goes towards my upcoming reporting trip to Ukraine. Thanks for the support. The link is below. Slava Ukraine. The administration keeps falling back on this excuse that we have achieved military victory. We've destroyed the Iranian Air Force. We've destroyed the Iranian Navy. Can you put that into perspective for us? And I'm going to tee this up for you. How long did the Iraqi Navy last at the beginning of OIF, a conflict in which you participated? How long did the Iraqi Air Force last? Go back to Vietnam. My dad was an F-4 pilot in Vietnam. How long did the Vietnamese Navy last? And how did that war turn out for the U.S.?
Yeah, the irony of this is we seem to be claiming victory and yet then going right back into the same battle space to reassert those same battles all over again. I don't know how many times we apparently, decimated, completely destroyed Iran's nuclear capability, and yet we keep going back to do it all over again. And I think that the notion that just simply knocking out part of their original Navy while leaving the IRGC in place. I think the fact that this administration clearly doesn't understand decentralized command and control in the Iranian space is clear because they still have the military capability to wage attacks. You mentioned Iraq. I mean, we were there for a long time. We went in with very little. After the opening salvos of resistance, and yet it took years and thousands of lives, and ultimately we didn't fully achieve the victory that we originally claimed, and that was when we had competence working in our political sphere, more than we have today.
Yeah, it's definitely more competence than we have today. I would argue misguided, but at least competent
misguided for sure.
Compared to Hegseth and the sycophants he's now surrounded himself with. Can you talk to us a little more about the IRGCN, the Navy, and what they bring to this fight? Because I want, as fellow Navy guys, I want this audience to understand that you can sink Iranian frigates, you can take out whatever subs they had left. That's not what is closing the Strait of Hormuz. They have a very significant asymmetric advantage. What does that mean, especially from the perspective of a superpower that controls the airways? What can you still do with small boats?
I think that as naval officers, while I wasn't a surface warfare, we can look back in history at exactly what small vessels can do. The USS Cole is an example of asymmetric warfare that was absolutely devastating to a large combatant ship. And the thing that people don't realize, maybe with some of these graphics, go ahead.
Jason, remind us what the Cole was, what our 17 shipmates, how they died on board one of the most sophisticated anti-missile systems ever built. It wasn't a missile that nearly sunk the Cole.
No, it was fundamentally, similar tactics to what we've seen in both in Iraq and Afghanistan. Fundamentally, it was, a suicide mission with a small, heavily loaded boat with lots of explosives that was able to get inside of a threat ring to the USS Cole and simply explode next to the side of that ship. And it, like you just said, I mean, it killed 17 sailors. And it was once again an example that we seem to have to relearn the lessons of the past. We've seen asymmetric warfare throughout our history, throughout our military, and yet we keep relearning these missions. It's not something that the threat is not always the biggest weapon in the arsenal. Oftentimes, as Sun Tzu has taught us, when you are overmatched, then there are other methods that you have to look to. And that asymmetric, small, what appears to be a small threat is exactly what they're doing. It's exactly how we suffered so many losses in Iraq and Afghanistan with asymmetric warfare, with IED missions. And that's all it is. These are simply nautical IEDs. And in the Straits of Hormuz, people don't realize with the graphics, it's not really open. There are boats everywhere, tiny boats, fishing boats, people who are just trying to live their life and work along with the large vessels. And, trying to keep an understanding of who is the threat in the area is very difficult when you're surrounded by, hundreds of small vessels, and not all of them. In fact, most of them are not actually a threat. But that's exactly what the IRGC is going to be continuing to use to their advantage, is that lack of understanding, that lack of knowledge of who's who in the zoo, if you will, to quote how we speak sometimes in the military. But that's the thing that we need to understand. So it's great, fine, the large capital ship Navy, the president loves to say it's on the ocean bottom, but that's not the threat that we're actually worried about. And I don't see we have anything in our near future that's going to truly combat that.
I got to ask you about NATO. You held a senior role there, at least on the military staff, as a U.S. liaison. How badly damaged is that relationship now? Is there any hope of repairing it? What's your assessment?
Yeah, I was, as you said, I was an executive officer on the NATO International Military Staff in the Plans and Policy Division there in Brussels at headquarters during the first Trump administration. And there was great amounts of confusion then. What is the U.S. role in America? What is the in the world? What is the U.S. role in NATO? We had already started to hear some of the discussions that we hear now, even louder. But there was a lack of leadership fundamentally from the U.S. perspective, and NATO as an organization that has been around, that we helped create, over 70 years ago, is somewhat, I think, disenchanted with the United States now. How are they supposed to, come to our aid when we also have threatened our allies? The game that Trump wanted to play with Greenland, that is a real thing. Okay, this is Danish land. The idea that Canada being the 51st state, those are not idle threats. Those are actual statements that make people understand maybe the U.S. isn't the serious partner that we always thought they were. Now, I truly believe we are. I think that we are in a state of confusion with our current leadership. I think it can be rebuilt, but it won't be rebuilt anytime soon with the current administration in place, because the truth of it is, just like contractors in New York in the 80s, nobody can trust Donald Trump to stand by his word. And so that stretches not just to NATO, but to our Asian partners and allies. When you start realizing that perhaps America is not going to fulfill its contract and treaty obligations, well, when you're in a dangerous area, you start wondering if you can actually count on America. And we need to start working back towards that end.
That was an excerpt of my conversation with Commander.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.